Hey, hi. Yeah, hi everyone. So I have a confession to make. You know, in the circle of friends, you always have that one guy who makes weird recommendations to the group, tries to get the group into really niche games, like really super oddly hyper specific games. I was that guy in my circle of friends. And I had some weird niche games. So hi, I'm Welshie1, and I want to talk to you about niche games and how we drag our friends and families down this rabbit hole with us. Usually, I would have been doing this as a review on one or two games, but for some reason, as I was talking and remembering some of these niche games, I realized I have done this a lot. An uncomfortable amount of times, in fact. I think I have a problem. I think I have a need for that my weird choices are justified and I need to bring people along. Or it might just be the fact that these weird niche games are multiplayer. And when we're talking niche games, we don't have to just talk about video games. I mean, for starters, like D&D, they are before the likes of Critical Role and the other online streaming services. You know, these games were niche. I was part of that weird little niche group in high school. I didn't get many dates back then. I was that weird kid playing Warhammer and D&D in the library. I was born too early. I think if it was now, smooth sailing, but beforehand it was like he's indoors and he's just rolling dice and he's talking with a whole bunch of people and looking at math rocks. So let's define what is niche, what is odd, because is rolling dice and playing board games and D&D odd? No, it's not. It's not odd now. Back when I was young, yes, it was odd, but now it's not. But even then, if we're doing this about maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago, it wouldn't be. I'm talking about where we get really hyper specific. Now, I'm not talking about hyper specific like using tabletop, for example. Yeah, Shadowrun's oddly specific. No, not really. There was a good mixture there. There's a lot of people that were into that. But I'm talking about when you find those really odd hyper specific things. For example, using the tabletop theme, maybe something like the end of the world. Mainly specifically end of the world, the old gods. That is oddly specific. That is hyper specific. We're not talking just survival and the end of the world. We're talking about gods. And if we're talking about a hyper oddly specific thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're trying to go maybe 3, 4, maybe even 5 levels deep where it is a odd niche, a odd specific thing. And I've done this a lot for video games. In fact, I think it all started with my brother doing it to me, where he got me into MMOs, which back then, 20, 30 years ago, it was new. It was very exciting. It wasn't just playing video. It wasn't just playing games and then playing video games and playing a multiplayer game. It was playing an MMO. It was playing with hundreds of other people. He did this with their Guild Wars, which then got me into World of Warcraft. And then I took that love of World of Warcraft and I applied it and got all my workmates at my first job into it. There used to be a little cardboard piece, a little piece of paper that used to be the reference code. 1 free week of World of Warcraft, and I passed that around the office. I think that might have been my first official drug deal back then. The first sample's free, and I got I think about 4 or 5 of my workmates into it who, were very skeptical at the playing online with hundreds of people, but paying for it as well. But again, very odd timing. It's very commonplace now, but back then, eyebrows were raised. But it wouldn't be till I think 2009, maybe 2010, that I had my first success, what I would call major success, at getting a very niche game into the hands of my friends, and that would be with Monster Hunter Tri. Now, saying getting your friends into Monster Hunter nowadays, very easy. We've had Monster Hunter World, we've had Monster Hunter Mobile get released. It's become very common. It's become a worldwide phenomenon. But if you've got to remember, back in 2009 and earlier, Monster Hunter was super niche. And it was a different beast, no pun intended. Monster Hunter was a very, very hard sell. And what was more impressive was I got my future wife into it. Now, why would this be impressive? If you've never played Monster Hunter Tri, playing Monster Hunter games back then was really different. It was not easy to get people into, and there wasn't much material around it. It was a very different game. It was very... I guess planning was required. I guess time investment, and it was very slow. It was a very slow pace. Hunting a monster wasn't just like what you do now, where you kind of drop in, drop out, and have all that happening. You would have to plan your hunts out. You would have to be doing full days of gathering materials to have all your stuff ready for the hunt. Not like in today's Monster Hunter, which is you could sort of gather on the go and you'd never have to do a farming run. It was very different, and it was very slow. It was very, very slow paced, even in an action hunting game. I think Monster Hunter was the first easy sort of game to sort of pitch, because at least on the tin it sounded awesome. You're going to hunt monsters, kill them in boss battles, and craft armor. It sounded cool. But back in Monster Hunter Tri days, and even before that, from 2 to even 1, prepping for a hunt was time consuming. You couldn't grab a stuff on the fly that you could in Monster Hunter World. While you could, it wasn't feasible with the time restrictions, and having to bring the specific tools to do the gathering and then make the stuff itself. So you would have to do pre-hunts to be able to gather up your healing items, to gather up the stuff to make your traps. Yes, you would want to go kill the Regigris, but killing the Regigris means you need to prep your heal items, and your traps if you're going to go in front of the trap. While Monster Hunter World, you can grab this stuff on the fly, quickly craft away, and go ham. If you had nothing, you could prep on the field. Again, great quality of life changes, but back in those days, not as feasible. And that's not even getting into Nintendo's friend code system and have to then set up either Discord. I don't even know if Discord was a thing back then. I think I might have still been using Ventrilo. Yeah, my ear just started to show. It was fun when you finally got into the hunts, but it was a pain to get everyone together, and especially how Nintendo don't like you talking to people, because, people out there on the internet are horrible and weird people. Why are you looking at me like that? So Monster Hunter then became a regular date night within my household. It was harder to get my other friends into it, because again, with the ways of the Nintendo friend system and just really coordinating, and also happened to do farming runs to prep, it was maybe too niche for them. Eventually, Ultimates 4 came out, and Monster Hunter World just really made it streamlined and easy. But I think World stopped Monster Hunter being niche. I think it took the niche out of Monster Hunter, and it's a better game for it, but that defeats the purpose of this video of where we're talking about niche games. I, however, would keep finding some weird niche games and keep trying to drag my friends on weird and wonderful rides. I have a problem, don't I? So then I was gently reminded by my friends about another weird niche game that I got, and this would have been in the high point of Kickstarter. Back in 2013, I think it would have been, yeah. With Pulsar, The Lost Colony, a spaceship simulator multiplayer game that was also like a roguelike. Again, we're hitting a very niche mark. Now, I know what you're probably saying, well, that just sounds like, a high-tech version of Sea of Thieves. But again, 2013, while Sea of Thieves was 2018. Again, 5 years we're talking, and I like to say I was ahead of the curve, but I don't know. I think I was just a weird guy that was just digging around the internet and kind of going, that is really cool, that is very oddly specific. I want to play a multiplayer game where we're running a spaceship, where you need 5 friends, each with a very specific role. What are we doing this for? Are we leveling up? Are we standing up? No, we're just exploring the universe. There is no goal, there is just explore. Again, we're talking about layers here. We're going oddly specific. Now, Pulsar is a fun game, and I'd highly recommend it, especially if you can get 4 or 5 friends. And I remember, trying to do the sales pitch of it, and the art style didn't really sell some of them, but the gameplay was solid. We ended up going to a LAN, so we have a LAN here in Perth. We used to, unfortunately, due to COVID and the expenses of it, it died a painful death. Rest in peace, Red Flag. So Red Flag was where about 500 to maybe even 800, I think even close to 1,000 nerds would all gather for a weekend in a school, like in a high school gym, and would just play games all through the night. And the 4 of us just sat in a row playing Pulsar for hours on end, with people gawking in awe of our game. Again, I think we were the trendsetters for that. We were ahead of the curve on that one. It was an odd game to get into. You had to be part of the Kickstarter, which many people weren't too eager to throw money at, because around 2013 was when people started getting burned. The Kickstarter games were getting a really bit of a bad rep at this time, For every game that you had, like Pulsar the Lost Colony, that came out and was a great success, you had other games like Yog Ventures or The Stomping Land or Goddess that would come out and just really sour the lake. I mean, hell, you still got games like Star Citizen, which are trucking along making millions and millions of dollars, and yet it's the most either with it or against it sort of community. Also, just for funsies, I backed 2 of those free games that I mentioned earlier. I'll let you try to guess which ones they are. So we would spend all of our time at Red Flag for about 4 or 5 hours playing this multiplayer spaceship simulator game. Just laughing and carrying on with people staring at us and people asking, how do we get into it? And then asking about it. And the game wasn't on Steam. You had to have purchased a early copy through Kickstarter, which back in 2013, people were starting to get burnt on Kickstarter. So it was a bit of an odd sell. But here was this game, and it was, again, it was built for very specific people. And it turned out we were those specific people. So I would count this as my 2nd official win. Maybe 3rd with World of Warcraft. I don't know. I still feel a little guilty about the World of Warcraft spreading through my workplace. But eventually we'd have the new generation in 2018 with Sea of Thieves. But again, like Monster Hunter, it didn't feel niche. It felt like it ran its course and it became, commonly accepted, and it became very trendy, very hip, very cool. But we're not here for hip and cool. We're all here for the odd specific things that people would raise your eyebrow and go, really? Okay, well, whatever floats your boat. And it would be in 2013 we'd also get another little niche game. This one being made by a small, I think one person, maybe even a small team, Haven and Hearth. Haven and Hearth is a weird beast to try and explain to people. Think of a survival game, survival MMO, but the progress of the game is your survivability and making life easier. No dungeons, no loot, just, hey, we started from a stick hut eating berries to maybe we'll have a shirt and a roof over our head. The art style and the stalling assets from the 2013 edition, which were clearly placeholder, didn't help the sales pitch on it, and it was just an awkward one. I mean, here you are, we're playing, Diablos, World of Warcraft. I just got them into Monster Hunter where we're talking boss fights with epic monsters, and here I am going, how about a game that is 2D, super grindy, has the sound effects from Legend of Zelda, and we are going to struggle for a week to make a shirt. We might even make some bread. And then in a month, we might dig up some ore. Surprisingly, my friends weren't really too into this one. Maybe I need to work on my sales pitch. Again, I'm more the background guy. I don't work sales. I never had a sales job in my life. But eventually, I did worm some of them into playing it, and they really enjoyed it. Or at least I think they did. I don't know if they were just being nice to me. It might have been the combination. But Haven and Hearth was one of those games that's lived in my mind, constantly just floating to the surface. It's still around, it's just, it looks different. But the art style evolved, as all things do. And unfortunately, it kind of lost me on that. It sort of brought in a magical and fantastical part to the game, which has sat and resonated with players who are still playing to this day. And I highly recommend giving it a whirl. It's a free game to play. Give it a shot. But it lost me in that translation. I kind of liked the realism, air quotes, that it had going for it, with the less fantastical. But the grind was real, and that's kind of what drew me to the game. And the realism that a village could not be run by yourself, because again, that was the idea. You were living in a community. It wasn't about fighting dragons and exploring dungeons and warring with other clans. Although you could eventually war with other people, it was the base survival. It was, okay, we need shelter, we need food, we need clothes, we need tools, and these things took time. There was a grind. And not everyone could master everything, which is where the community aspect came on it. Which, again, it just tickled this niche that didn't exist. I think other games have done it better in introducing these ideas to the grand community, with the likes of Ark, where you'll spend your XP on certain particular points, and you'll have your builder, you'll have your farmer, you'll have your breeder, who's really good at these things. Haven and Hearth was I felt one of the pioneers of this very subset of gaming. And again, it was in the not dealing with the wars, it was the farming, the crafting. It would take weeks to be able to kit out your entire community with cloves, and months of planning to even start trying to strike into the earth and make a mine. I mean, in most games nowadays, if you wanted some tools and that, you just go hit a rock and you're done in 5 minutes. This is where a game that required planning. You had to make sure you had the supplies on hand, the know-how, and the skills, and it just really hit a note that I was craving. It scratched that little itch in the back of the head that I think we all have, a real primal itch, and it was really rewarding, especially when it starts becoming just part of the day-to-day, and looking back and going like, wow, we have come a long way. And in 2015, I was blessed with another opportunity to try and get my friends into this sort of game as they all sort of dropped off. I think they gave me the month or two before they sort of dried out, and then 2015 rolled around, and I got them in again with Life is Feudal, except this one was even more super niche. Again, it was medieval, which I think medieval's cool. I think we can all agree. Just anything medieval just hits a certain note that we can all agree and like smile and nod and go, yeah. But Life is Feudal was the exact same thing, except in 3D, which made it easier for my graphics friends who were snobs who needed pretty graphics to be able to get into it and go like, okay, there's some pedigree behind this. But it was even more specialized roles. So like Life is Feudal, where you would have to level up certain particular skills, and you couldn't level up everything. You would have your butcher, you would have your farmer, you would have your mason. Life is Feudal would go into even the doing terraforming, and that was a hard sales pitch to den mothers and the geologists of Life is Feudal. I tip my hat to you. You guys are the unsung heroes, because that must be such a painful pill to swallow when you're coming on. I mean, here is, Jeff gets the cool thing of being the hunter. He gets to go out there manly shooting things. You got, maybe, David over there, who's the baker. He's providing the sustenance and the nourishment to the community. And what do you get? You get a shovel, and you get to move the dirt from over there to over there. You gotta make it nice and flat. It was hard. If you got that job and you did it, good on you. I know we all took, at least in my community, we all took turns in moving dirt, but there were some dedicated dirt movers in our group, and I feel sorry for them. Like, I truly do. You guys were the unsung heroes. You would work tirelessly for hours to flatten an entire area, and nobody said thank you. The masons didn't say thank you. The farmers didn't say thank you. You leveled it all up so we could build our castle, and we all just kind of were like, yeah, it's done. The blacksmith got all the praise, like, oh, I got some armor from him. Like, thanks. But let's not talk about, grave digger Gregory over here, who's been tiring the fields with a shovel. God, I feel sorry for Gregory. Fortunately, because of how hyper niche it was, Life is Feudal didn't do too well. It went for an MMO, and the MMO didn't fare too well. I think if they had focused on the small, tight-knit community, it could have been still going. The game is still alive, but it's alive with air quotes on life support. I mean, the last numbers, what were we looking at? Oh, God. And I know there are still some niche games out there as well that are still going strong, and I really do want to give them a look. But again, I think I've ran my course of how many times I can sort of rope people in to try these weird experimental games. And I use experimental with air quotes. But I think the last niche game that I got pitched to me, which sounded amazing, but I haven't had the chance to give it a look, is Foxhole, where it's a war simulator, but you also have not only the frontline people fighting the war, but also the backline making everything from the bullets to the fuel to even the terrain itself. I mean, that sounds amazing. Again, my brain is wired a little bit differently, where it's like, oh, I don't want to be in the front line getting shot at, but if you're talking about me making bullets for the troops and then driving that to the front line so the boys in blue and up front can keep fighting, then you've got my interest. They're doing a new one as well, Anvil Empires. Again, medieval. Medieval it just sounds cool. Building castles and doing logistics. I think that's what it is. I think I'm just really into logistics. But not all niche games have to be multiplayer. We've got a lot of niche games that are single player. I mean, take the likes of Dwarf Fortress, which has now become even more accessible. It's still quite niche. It's still hard for people to get into, but that's what I love about it. It goes for something oddly specific, and it scratches a weird itch that we all have. Dwarf Fortress, where you're managing a fortress, and that sounds like it's a very broad thing that's been done before, but it's not till you start getting into it where you start hitting those weird little tier levels, where every little subsequent thing is its own, what would be a full game in another system. Even Crusader Kings, with Crusader Kings coming out on consoles, it's become a lot easier. But I remember for the longest time, people were fascinated with Crusader Kings too, but would just look at it in fear of just how massive the machine of Crusader Kings is. Again, thankfully, Crusader Kings 3 has come out and it's made it a bit more easier, it's made it more acceptable, and it's really awesome to see that. I'm enjoying my time playing these weird niche games that are single player now. At least it's easier to get them in, but the problem with them being single player is the grand scale of these sorts of come down, and you don't quite get that dopamine hit. I think it's the dopamine hit when you finally wrangled someone in. I feel this is what kidnappers are probably getting their itch from. It's just like, eventually these people will like me. I'm not saying that I kidnapped my wife and got her to play just to play Monster Hunter, but I could see how people could possibly think that. But I've had other niche games come my way. The simulator market has really exploded in what's considered what was already a niche market getting even more niche. I mean, gas station simulator. Who was asking for that? And yet it turned out to be one of the funnest games I've played of the year. Even Goat Simulator, although not a true simulator of a goat, I do appreciate what Goat Simulator was doing, and I really hope that we're going to see more and more of Goat Simulator. Anyway, thanks for letting me just ramble about these weird niche games that live rent-free in my head. I'm still hoping for a resurgence on games like Life is Feudal and Heaven and Hearth, where it takes the survival aspect and just goes ham on it. Again, it's a weird little niche market, and it probably doesn't make that much money, so the chances of seeing a game like that come round again is probably slim to none. I think survival games will hit the point where they are now, and we'll sort of go with that with different cults appearing in different settings. My friends have probably enjoyed the times that they've had with these weird games that I've forced them into, and they've probably forgotten about them while they continue, ringing through my head. Anyway, my name is Welshie1, and thank you for your time. Let me know of any weird niche games that you've kidnapped your friends and forced them to play, and who knows, I might give them a look. Until next time, gamers, you have a great day. These games are still online. Maybe if I kidnap enough of you guys, we could kickstart them again. Does anyone like working with shovels?